worry about you. All right, let's go. Hi, amazing Biz Besties, and welcome to our next session. And I get to introduce you to the beautiful Chenae, if you don't know her. Chenae is an amazing businesswoman who actually pivoted her zone of genius, is that what you call it? And was very courageous in choosing to work with courageous women and pivot what she does to help. And I admire Chenae so much because she lovingly shows up, she lovingly tells you how it is, and she's fierce. She's really fierce with what she believes in, and you're one of the people that actually stands up for what they believe in, and you make sure that you do that within self-love too. So I'm extremely excited to have you here. Chenae, what is your superpower, and can you share a little bit about yourself?
Thank you for such an awesome intro. My superpower, do you want me to do that first or a little intro on myself first?
Whatever you feel comfortable with.
All right, well, I'll talk to what you spoke to briefly first. Yes, I did a complete pivot last year, 2019. I, up until really early on last year, was exclusively just offering women support with their Facebook marketing, organic reach strategies, making the most out of it. And Nicole was one of those long-term clients in that time. And I had a lovely little business going, and I had just completed some intuitive guide training, and I could no longer continue to offer what I thought was my zone of genius at the time. I thought, yep, this is my zone of genius. And it turns out it wasn't. In fact, if you're familiar with the Big Leap book by Gay Hendricks, he talks about the zone of excellence and then the zone of genius. And I had this glaringly obvious realization happen that I was actually working in my zone of excellence, and that there was something bigger calling out to me. And I remember describing to people that I could sort of see in my mind's eye that there was something off in the distance that needed to happen, and I didn't know what it was. And now, obviously, in 2020, March 2020, I now know what that is. And to kind of transition that little story into what you asked me to do to explain my superpower, that also came from a beautiful retreat in Tuscany and has evolved over time. And my superpower is that I challenge courageous women. As Nicole said, I work with courageous women. And you've got to be courageous to work with me because, as I said, and as you said, and I say all the time, I am not interested in your comfort. I'm interested in your evolution. And I've totally stolen that from my mentor, Ricky Jane Adams. I think it's brilliant because we're not here to stay comfortable. And what I do with those courageous women is I challenge them who they're getting in their own way and they've had enough of their own bullshit, basically. And I challenge them to get out of their own way so that they can receive their intuition. And then not only that, they can receive it, but then they can act upon it. And that's one of the key things that I'd like to touch on today whilst we're talking, Nicole, is what it is that stops us from acting on it. So that's my superpower. I'm going to get you out of your comfort zone.
And she does, lovingly, but she does call you in the bullshit. And you think it's over sometimes, and then we go, well, that's not enough. Let's keep going on this. I love working with you, Chenae, and I really do respect what you do. And I remember when you were in Tuscany and you wrote your post and you said fuck on it. And I don't think I've ever heard you say fuck before. And it was like, okay, Chenae means business now. And even that, but there's a whole heap of us that were working with you, but that statement actually called us out and went, how does that now fit into our lives, and how do we use your evolution to actually grow within ourselves, whether it be business or whatever we're doing?
Yeah.
So how do you think, as women, we sometimes get in our own way?
Oh, one of the biggest ones that I see happen is self-doubt. And we don't believe in ourselves that we are capable of doing anything really, for that matter, and one of the things that I have come to realize in my own journey, in my own training, is that really we're not just 3D finite physical body. We are so much more than this physical body that we exist in. We are ultimately, in our true nature, we're pure unlimited consciousness. So that means you could do anything, baby. Like literally anything. If you could dream it, you can create it. But we often doubt ourselves, and we doubt that we are capable of doing even just the 3D things, that we never give ourselves enough credit for how powerful we truly are. That's one of them. One of the other things that we like to do is procrastinate. We've got these amazing things, and we like to procrastinate scroll, or we like to procrastinate anything else, bake, clean, whatever it might be. And ultimately, that's us just getting in our own way, because we know what we meant to do. We pretend that we have no idea.
Yeah.
And really, that's just an absolute, I call bullshit on that all the time, because we know what to do. You actually don't need anybody to give you the answers. You've got the answers. You're just not willing to stretch your comfort zone to see what's possible. And more often than not, we're afraid of our light and what our success would look like than we are of our shadow and what it would look like to fail. We're actually more afraid of our light. And there's that beautiful famous quote by Marianne Williamson that talks about that.
The other thing that you work closely with is fear. And we often are fearful of what we're capable of.
Yeah.
You know, we turn up and we dial ourselves down because we're fearful of what the next step is going to be, and if we're successful, what that's going to be. What do you suggest? And I know that you have many habits and things formed. You do. And what do you suggest that we work around, and why do we work around fear?
So when I talk about fear, it's a slightly different perspective. It's not simply just fear of spiders or heights, or in my example, cane toads. I'm really not comfortable with cane toads, and I live in Queensland, so we get them a lot when it rains in summer. But when I talk about fear, I mean anything that is not love. So there's two options here. Is it fear or is it love? And so when we talk about fear, yes, it's, afraid of things happening, but it's also anything that is not love. And so one of the best things that we can do, I believe, is that we can use our fear as a friendly ally. Even though our fear can sometimes not feel comfortable, if we are afraid of the fear, then we start to get all caught up in it, and then it leads us to just stop dead in our tracks. But if we realize that, let's say we're feeling frustrated or overwhelmed, because all of these are fears because they're not love, or doubtful of ourselves, or whatever it might be, when we're feeling that way, that is the fear, being anything that is not love, being a friendly ally to us. It's saying, hey, Chenae, hey, Nicole, you've moved away from love. Do something different. But instead, we get addicted to the stress hormones, and then we just keep perpetuating those cycles, and we wonder why we're unfulfilled with our lives. If we don't take any responsibility, we're not going to get the results and the outcomes that we want. And that's where that fucking word came from in that piece of paper. It was like, get out of your own way so that you can have what it is that you want. Get the fuck out of your own way so that you can have what it is that you want. Yeah.
And that sounds confrontational. It's not, but I remember working with you one time and getting off a call and actually remembering to be so damn grateful. I think we were talking about not being visible, or I wasn't comfortable with being visible. And I remember getting off our call going, I am so goddamn lucky to be able, that this is my problem. And it actually did turn into love, that I was grateful that I was able to express that this was my problem, because there were people that don't have the opportunity to do what I was doing, good, bad, otherwise. No, there's some women out there, and there's some people out there, even in Australia, that will never have the luxury of doing what you and I are doing here, being able to speak our truth and grow from each other and all of that. And I think when we move away from that fear and actually, speak to somebody like you, or you focus, hey, are we moving away from love? We actually get fulfilled and remember that gratitude of how lucky we are, how amazing we are.
What a fucking privilege to be able to be working on our mindset, on our visibility, on our this, to have the option to even run our own businesses, to work from home. Like, that's a fucking privilege. And we often forget that because we move out of that space of love and out of that space of gratitude. Yeah.
I think I've spoken to a lot of women, and we've also spoken about how our fears are our unconscious and all of that throughout this series, of how that actually works for us, that our fears, in your case, our fears can work for us instead of pushing us forward. They can actually be that nice, comfortable zone and safety zone, and it's important that we move forward to that. how do we do that, Chenae, without, if we're sitting here thinking, what Chenae's just said, is that, that's for me. What do we do next? Like, what is the thought process of what we do next?
Yeah. So what we need to recognize is that a lot of those things are actually stored in the subconscious, which is the basement. So it's 90 to 95% of most of us. That conscious reasoning mind that identifies, I like sushi and I don't like techno music or whatever it is. That's our personality. That's 5 to 10%. We like to think that that's actually calling the shots, but really it's not. It's the subconscious. So what we do is we actually have to explore the contents of our subconscious, because throughout our life, growing up as children, moving into teens, then moving into adulthood, what happens is if we don't reject something that we have seen, let's say it's an argument or something on the television or something to that effect, and we don't reject it, by default we're accepting it as true, and then it goes down into our subconscious, and then we start to have those patterns play out. And this is not a new concept. Most of the women who are watching these are going to be aware of that concept to some effect. But what we do is we don't just say, oh, well, that's just my pattern. That's just because then what we're doing is we're starting to identify with those things that are in our subconscious. And our subconscious is really agile. It doesn't mean that just because it's down there, it has to stay there. And it also doesn't mean that it's just because it's been there for, since I was 5, that it has to stay there. You can absolutely move things out from the subconscious. And this is what we're talking about when we refer to raising consciousness. It's quite literally raising things from the subconscious, where you are not necessarily aware of them, moving them out of that basement or below the deck, if you will, moving them out and then choosing differently. So we have to actually identify it first and go for a bit of a dig, and then we excavate it up and out, and then we choose differently. And that doesn't happen in everyday life. It doesn't just happen where you click your fingers. That's a commitment. That takes effort and that takes work. And the easiest and quickest way that I know to do that is a practice called the micro method. It's the intuitive intelligence micro method in full. And it's basically a practice where you identify what's going on that's causing you some kind of fear. Remembering fear is anything that's not love, distress, frustration, anxiety, doubt, whatever. And then you ask what's beneath it, and you ask yourself what that dominant negative self-belief is. You can't do that from here. You can't do that from your cranial brain. You can't do that just whilst you're driving a car. You have to privilege your heart, which is your intuitive intelligence center. That's how you access everything that is available to us. So we actually have to take the time. That shit doesn't happen overnight, and you don't just click your fingers. You actually have to commit to doing it. And it's one of those things that you want to do often, because we've let a lot of things slip down into our subconscious that are not particularly helpful or serving us in any way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it loves sense. And I'd like, as you said, you were talked about the 3D, but you actually work past the 3D, and I think it's a really important difference when we're talking about subconscious and consciousness with you. How does moving beyond the 3D work?
Well, what happens is the 3D is the last, how do I explain this in a quick and easy way that's not going to blow us over time? So if we think about the energy plane being 5D, and then 4D is the imagination. And if you can imagine it, it can be true, which is what I talked about earlier. So if you can imagine it with the 4D, you can draw that possibility, that whatever it is, whatever outcome, whatever reality it is, you can draw that down from the infinite field using that. Yes, there's a lot of talk out there. There's lots of experts that talk about the science of intuition and the power of meditation and belief and all of that sort of stuff. And so what happens is this is the easiest thing to work with, really, because our resistance lives down here in the 3D. Yeah, we don't want to be uncomfortable. We would much rather, even though the comfort zone is often shit, we would much rather stay in the comfort zone than to stretch our cells, our physical cells, our emotional cells out further. And so this is how we end up with sickness. If you catch something when it's in the energetic realm, before it manifests in the 3D, it's a lot quicker and easier to work with, because the 3D is the last plane that it gets to. So if you're focusing your energy and attention on something, you're going to manifest that in reality. The more you do that, that's how people, those people who believe they can conquer cancer are those people who conquer cancer, because they're literally visualizing that reality with their 4D imagination, and they draw that reality down from the 5D to create it in the 3D. Does that kind of help with that?
Yeah.
Does
So
it leave you with more questions?
So how do you use that though? How do we embrace that with it? Because you're trained as an
Intuitive guide. Yeah.
Intuitive guide.
Yep.
And I think we need to touch on your definition of intuition as well. Well, I think before we kind of go a little bit further, because it has a big step part of what you do.
Huge. Okay, so the definition of intuition for me, and then do you want me to talk a little bit more about what I actually do?
I think so, because I think that is your superpower, and for people to understand that when they're overwhelmed with stress, there are other ways to actually help with that.
Yeah, totally. So the biggest thing I want to say about what I do and the work I do is that it's always about empowering, which is why I said yes to this, because the big old capital letters that you wrote was empower. The work I do is about empowering people. It's not about taking your power away and saying that I can heal you or that I can fix you, because you're not broken in the first place. So I can't fix you. There's nothing wrong with you. You've just moved away from love. And so what I think is important, and when I teach intuition, and I'll tell you about the formula in a second, is reminding you that you're already intuitive. Like, I don't have any special gifts that you don't already possess yourself. The idea that intuition is a special gift bestowed upon a select few who work in the psychic world is absolute rubbish, in my opinion, because we're all intuitive. There's two types of intuition. There's that local form of intuition, which is our energetic sensitivity. You only need to go to the supermarket and walk past someone to know what that is like. You can intuitively feel, hear, see, or know what's going on for that person, because you're giving and receiving energy at any given point in time, whether you mean to or not. It's happening anyway. If you've got a pulse, you've got that happening anyway.
We're energetic.
Exactly.
Energetic beings.
We're energetic beings. Yeah, we're electromagnetic beings, and we give and receive signals. So ideally, what I teach people to do is what to do with that energy is take responsibility for what it is that you're putting out into the world, but also be responsible for how you receive other people's energy, because that's no one else's responsibility but yours. And the reason for that is, so when we do that, we can then start to tap into non-local intuition, which is the type of intuition that I'm really excited about. This is what I teach people to do, women specifically. And the non-local form of intuition is when we can access things outside of this time and space in which we are currently located. So for the easiest and quickest example is past lives. That's one of the quickest ways. But it also means that you can know without any 3D proof around you that there's just something not quite right with a loved one on the other side of the world. It's that non-local form of intuition. Non-local meaning that it's not local to you. It's not because you've passed them in the supermarket. It's because you are pure unlimited consciousness, and therefore you can give and receive. You have access to everything that is available at any given point in time. But that takes spiritual self-esteem. So when I talk about intuition, there's a little formula that I teach. And so the idea is that what we're looking for is actually not intuition, but what I'll talk about outwardly is intuition. But once you get into a course with me, I'll start talking about intuitive intelligence. And the difference between intuition and intuitive intelligence is that intuition is innate. It's not special. It's not a gift, even though lots of people say it's a special gift. Lots of people say it's a burden. It's not a fucking burden. It's an absolute privilege. So this particular type of intuition is innate. If you've got a pulse, it's there. You've got it, right? If you've got a pulse, and I'm thinking that everyone watching this does, you do, I do, we've all got pulses. So what's happening is we need to move away from just intuition to intuitive intelligence, which is innate intuition that's biological. And what we need to add to it is trust. Or in other words, spiritual self-esteem, because we're getting the nudges, we're getting the intuitive hits. We can't deny that. Everyone is getting them regardless. Yeah, regardless. It's happening. What we do with it is what counts, because most of the time we just dismiss it and we don't do anything with it. And therefore our intuition doesn't become a living, breathing way of being. It just becomes something that comes to us and then it's dead radio silence. There's no response. There's no action. There's no taking what it is that you've received and doing something with it. And that's the key.
And I think that's what, if you're not in the position to do that for yourself, that people can get that from you and guided through that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I show you how to do and empower you to do. Yeah.
Different sessions. The easiest way and the best way that I've been able to embrace what you do is through Heart Congruence.
Heart Congruence, yeah.
It used to be Heart Coherence, and
it was.
Heart Congruence, because it actually aligns us with that infinite, doesn't it?
Totally. Yeah. So Heart Congruence is an adaptation, again, by my mentor, Ricky Jane Addams, of Heart Coherence, which is from the Heart Math Institute. They do a lot of work at the intersection of science and spirituality, and Heart Resonance. And so Heart Congruence, it's the same outcome. It's just the way in which we do it is slightly different. So it's okay if you throw in a heart. The reason why we do this is because intuition rides with the highest vibration. And when we do heart congruence, you will move into a high vibration, usually gratitude or something like compassion or freedom or joy or abundance. You are literally moving yourself into that higher vibration feeling state. And then when we do that, everything is infinitely available to us. But it's really hard to hear intuition if you're running around in here thinking about to-do lists. I've got to get that from the shops. Oh, I have to do this. And oh shit, I forgot to do that. Did I lock the car? Did I do this? It's really hard to hear intuition when this is running the show, because the heart is actually the gateway. And there's a little heart brain. We'll go a little bit of science. There's a little heart brain in the anatomical heart. So even though the anatomical heart is amazing and it pumps blood and it does all those amazing things, there's actually a little cluster of about 40-odd thousand neural cells in our anatomical. I'm pointing because you can't see my heart very well. I am wearing a shirt, by the way. In your anatomical heart, they're neural cells, right? And that cluster of 40-odd thousand neural cells is the gateway, is the portal to accessing everything, non-local intuition, everything that is available. And the reason for that is because the electromagnetic field that the heart generates is 500 times greater than that of your cranial brain. And so if you're an electromagnetic being and you're giving and receiving information, oh, I think I froze for a second. Am I back? Yeah. So if you're electromagnetic and you're giving and receiving information all the time, and the electromagnetic field of your heart is 500 times greater than your head, why would you not spend time privileging your heart, which is exactly what we do in Heart Congruence. If you want to be intuitive, that's a quick and easy way to do it.
And it is something to actually ground you as well. It's not very spiritual, but it's a great practice to actually introduce into our lives, because if you don't want to be visible, you can do it before.
Totally. Yeah. And we've done that together. Yeah. We've talked about that.
Yeah. And so I use it very much so. And also whenever you're in a session with Chenae, you also take part in Heart Congruence to bring us all down to at that infinite level. Yeah. Chenae, if people want to continue this conversation with you, where can they see you?
So the easiest place to find me is on my Facebook business page, hands down, which is just Chenae Carey Coaching on Facebook. If you need the spelling, it'll be somewhere with that. Yeah.
And I'll tag it on Facebook pages.
Perfect.
Do you have a place where people can experience Heart Congruence with you? Is it on your website or is it on your Facebook page?
You'll find it on my YouTube channel, actually. So if you Google Google or YouTube search, it doesn't matter, it'll come up either way. Heart Congruence with Chenae, you'll find it. There's two different versions. So there's one that's a little longer that's got a description of why we do it and a bit more detail. And then there's a short one because I got a special request of people wanting to do it with me guiding them all the time, going, I keep having to fast forward. So I did a quick and easy one where we get straight into it. So there's two out there.
So the first one, do go and watch the longer one that actually does explain to you why to do it, because it's really important. And I do urge you all to try it, because it really is a grounding exercise that we all can do from where we are. We don't have to be special. We don't have to have any skills, like you said. We can actually all take part in it. Chenae, what is one thing that the women watching today you would like them to take with them?
Oh, there's so many things that I want to say, so I'll just pick one. So I would say that you don't give yourself enough credit for how powerful you truly are.
I'm hearing you. I thank you. That's just the most amazing thing to finish on, because we do take our powers for granted. And I've learnt that very much, that when I've asked people for their superpowers, it's really made some people struggle to go, what is my superpower? When I look at them and think, you've got hundreds, we need to stop taking our superpowers for granted, because women are amazing, as so are men, but in this case, we're talking about women. They are amazing, and they need to actually celebrate themselves as well.
Yeah, we don't let ourselves shine anywhere near enough.
Thank you for joining me, and thank you for sharing all your wisdom and knowledge with us. Please go over to Chenae's page and follow her, and definitely jump on. Chenae, you may will you put that link maybe for the YouTube thing if people want to take part in the Heart Congruence with you.
Totally.
That would be so. Thank you for being a part of it, and we will see you all in the next session.
Thanks, Nicole.
Bye.